Hello, welcome back. It's 11 o'clock, Wednesday, 30th of June, 2021. And if you've come back after this morning's opening session, thank you. If you've just joined us, thank you also as well. Welcome back to the Retail Bulletin, Digital Transformation Strategy. And we've got another fantastic lineup of people to join us this morning for the next 45 minutes or so. So I'm Darren, I'll be your moderator for the session. Amongst other things, I'm also the exec chairman of men's skincare brand Scrubbed and Williams Harding Consulting as well. And Retail Bulletin asked me back to do some of these things. So thank you, Retail Bulletin, for hiring me. It's always appreciated. Audience, we love you to get involved. So whichever device you're using, somewhere on your screen, you will find a Q&A button. Use it because it's a brilliant way of getting questions to us that you can either ask one of the individual panelists or you can ask a more general question. My job as the moderator is to promise you, if you ask a question, we shall answer it for you before we end today's session. Hopefully everyone's feeling primed and ready for a great hour ahead, and on a wave of goodwill on the back of England's victory over Germany last night. I'm sure there's some sore heads out there in our audience. I know some people that have been celebrating hard and are feeling the pain. This morning, we'll sit back with the Retail Bulletin, grab a coffee, and hopefully enjoy some great content. Without further ado, I'm going to ask my panel to introduce themselves, and then we can get cracking. So, James, I'm going to start with you if I can. Good morning, sir. Tell us about you.
Good morning, and good morning to everybody attending as well. My name's James Coughlan, and I'm a Digital Transformation Director. What is that in a nutshell? Well, I've been working as an interim for the past 6-7 years now, across a number of sectors, retail being one of them, transportation, telco, and more recently, our Inspired Education Group, which is the world's second largest private education group. So working as an interim, it's a really exciting time because it's about really delivering those better business outcomes. So those, longer term value over shorter stints. And having worked at HMV for 3 years post the first administration in 2013, there was a wave of change, and I could already sense, during that period, 2013 to 2016, the rumblings of what we're now seeing as so far as the expedited digital transformations in the retail sector. So I'm very much looking forward to today's discussion, and it's great to be with you all.
And you're very welcome on the panel as well. Thank you, James, for that intro. Graham, sir, how are you doing? Tell us about you.
I'm good, thanks. Hi, everyone. So I'm Graham Wilson. I'm Head of Business Development at Sofology. My job title doesn't really sort of say exactly what I do, though. So Sofology, I'm responsible for the digital side of the business. So we've got retail stores, and then we have an online and an omni team who take all of our calls, and that's where I sit. I've been at Sofology for about 18 months, so I've been sort of squarely in the kind of the acceleration of digital within the business because obviously through the pandemic. Prior to my time at Sofology, I was at AO.com where I ran the group delivery function. So I've got a broad sort of range of experience across all the different aspects of a pure play online retailer, as well as obviously now with Sofology physical retail as well. So yeah, I'm excited to be back again. So looking forward to it.
Good stuff. And you're very welcome on the panel as well. Victoria, hello. Good morning.
Good morning. Hi, guys. So I'm Victoria Betts. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Hotter Shoes. Hotter, for those of you that may well not be familiar with it, is a comfort footwear brand targeting the 55 plus female audience. And my role there is accountable for the end-to-end customer experience and, like the two chats before me, the digital transformation. So 2020 has been quite a year, and I think for many of us, with the benefit of hindsight, has somewhat perversely meant that we've enjoyed some innovative and exciting developments. So keen to talk with you about what we've been doing and how effective we found it to be.
Yeah, 2020 has been quite a year. Underlined, I think, would be most people's comment. Absolutely. Listen, welcome to the panel. Thank you for joining us as well. And last but not least, Matthew, tell us about you, sir.
Thanks, Darren. Yeah, Matthew Furno with Locate. I'm the commercial director for Locate, which is a brand of GBG. GBG is a listed technology business headquartered out of the UK. We're a £2 billion company. and we do lots of cool stuff around location, identity, and fraud solutions. But I've lived and breathed locations and addresses for the last, oh goodness, 20 plus years. I am one of those location nerds, and I love everything to do with location. 20 years ago, it probably fueled the junk mail industry that all of us hated, but now locations are at the epicenter of e-commerce growth. And without good quality location data, whether it's for a pizza at a park bench or fueling rapid grocery delivery in 20 minutes in big cities, Locate sits at the checkout as that cool little device that helps you to enter an address in 5 or 6 keystrokes and get it right first time. So it's a relatively simple thing to describe. What we do under the surface is pretty extensive. And if I might, I'm going to blatantly just exploit this moment to say we're launching our next generation address capture today, which we're really excited about. So later on, go to locate.com and learn all about it. And we'd love to get your feedback. Sorry about that.
You exploit away, because actually thank you to you and the team at Locate for sponsoring this session as well. We really appreciate it. So happy to for you to do a plug there, because it's much appreciated for your sponsorship.
It's the last one. It's the last one.
You can plug as many times as you like, all of you actually. You're all very welcome, and you're all giving your time to the Retail Bulletin, so that's fine. But yeah, particular thanks to Locate for sponsoring this session. That's it. That's our panel. I think you'll agree it's a pretty stellar lineup. This session's about enhancing the online experience. So all those digital tech innovations that are out there, we're going to try and unpack some of that over the next session that we have. Please, as I said, do use the Q&A button, and let's get cracking. James, I'm going to start with you, if I may, sir. The pandemic, that word that we talk about every day, it's forced retailers to really expedite some new tech implementation. How can retailers cater for user adoption?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks, Darren. You're absolutely right. The last 18 months has resulted in retail and all sectors being flipped on their head. But in regards to, user adoption, first thing I would say is, don't expect your customers or your target users to just adapt. Yes, we've seen that huge increase in regards to e-commerce over and through the pandemic. However, it still should not be forgotten that adoption and training for internal customers as well is just as important. So for me, it's still very much around investing in content. So making sure where you are implementing new technology, new checkout flows, new ways to interact with your e-commerce stores, new ways to make contact with your contact centers. If your stores are becoming, as they are ever increasing for many retailers, micro fulfillment centers, making sure people can easily find that information and know exactly what it means versus pre-pandemic state. So it's almost like taking what was a traditional FAQs and really bolstering that out with as much great content, showcasing the new technology and the new ways to interact with your brand. But it's also about internally promoting collaboration, and it's also about testing as well. So before you do go to town with these new technologies, test would be my advice, and make sure that you're comfortable with what you're putting in or seeking to put into your customers' hands. Take that feedback, learn from that feedback, and adapt as you go. So of course it is that buzzword of agility, as part of a core strategy now moving forward. But I think it's really important to showcase through social, and to continue to invest in content. That would be my recommendation, Darren.
That word keeps coming up, agility. We spoke about that a lot on the first session that we had before this one, and it certainly seems to be the word in everybody's lips at the moment in terms of their business model. When you say test, are there? I would have took that as read that was happening. Is there examples of where people aren't testing and then getting their fingers burnt?
I think there is, yeah. I think if many retailers are honest with themselves, and I think it's fair to say that just through the sheer demand that the pandemic has brought, and also the need to get things out in the competitive landscape, I think there have been some product examples overlooked, and the importance of making sure that what you are going to expect your customers to do and how you're going to expect your customers to interact with you, making sure that internally, the communication is clear for all departments on exactly what is changing, when it's changing, what it means, and also accountability and responsibilities internally as well, to prevent things like finger pointing that can happen further down the line and cause a demoralization, especially for those who are immersed in this new technology and excited about getting this new technology out to their customers. It's crucial to make sure that testing and QA teams are now going outside of the realms of the IT four walls. They are interacting with their marketing teams, their proposition teams, and actually helping their finance teams to understand what impact this is going to have on the bottom line, and also CapEx and OpEx long term as well.
Got it. Okay, thank you, sir. I'm going to come back to you again shortly, but I'm going to move through the panel for now. Graham, you've got shops, and so these shops were closed quite a lot over the last 16 months. How have you guys leveraged, say, video tech to kind of bridge that online, offline gap?
Yeah, good question. So I guess we were quite lucky in that regard that before the pandemic actually kind of took hold, we already kind of had a video service up and running where we would, on the website, bottom right hand corner, you click on the little roundel and you would connect directly to one of our stores. And we saw some real positive signs with it before the pandemic sort of hit. What it allows us to do is, so if you think about buying a sofa, you commonly hear people refer to the sit test, where I think 90% of people who buy sofas want to actually go and sit on them before they actually try them. But with the way retail parks are located, they're often sort of 30, 40 miles outside of town, or they're an hour's drive or 45 minutes, and it's not always the most convenient. So what we saw was people were going into store doing the sit test, and then they were calling up through video to then complete the purchase. Now, that was fine before the pandemic, but then obviously when we closed all stores, we had to think about, okay, how do we use that tech to kind of continue the whole journey rather than just I guess the confirmation or some last minute questions. So we rolled it out across more stores, first and foremost, to give us more capacity. And then during the pandemic, we kept open some stores to create almost like a dark store concept where customers could call in off the website, again, in the same way as they would do pre-pandemic. And, they would talk to one of our Sofologists in either was Preston or Nottingham at the time. And, we really worked hard with the retail teams to ensure that the customers who were calling through on video almost got that like-for-like experience as though they were going into a store. So, that continuity of, your meet and greet, and then when you go into the actual product, you're demoing the product and showing the customer the things that normally they would sit on or feel. You have to almost like overemphasize the kind of the attributes of the product. And we just saw it absolutely take off. And it was a real kind of blessing for us during the first lockdown. And it's just from a growth point of view, it's just gone bonkers. What we have seen though, I guess, is in the first instance, we definitely saw more of a tech savvy type customer using it. And what we've seen as kind of the timeline has kind of continued is actually now we're seeing more of a kind of a typical retail customer using it. So adoption is actually kind of like normalized across the industry. And we think that that's down to the fact that pretty much everybody now has this capability. So from our point of view, it's a really, really good channel for us to engage with our customers. It makes shopping simpler because they don't have to, go back to the same store 2 or 3 times. They can just visit the store if they want to or not. They can use video and we promote it in that way to then do any follow-ups. So it makes the customer's life easier. And also, we from an online point of view, we see that when customers talk to Sofologists, the propensity to kind of convert goes up by about 5-fold. The AOV goes up by about 40% compared to our online AOV. So it's just, from our point of view, it's win-win. And the customer gets a great experience, and the results that we drive from it are also really, really healthy. So it's been an invaluable tool that we continue to use and think of new ways to use it in the future as well. So.
And what is I love the Sofologist word, by the way. Sounds like a great role. What is the Sophologist holding in terms of the actual piece of kit? When they were live in one of your stores to a customer, what device are they using?
So one of these, basically. So it's an Android phone. Okay. You can do it on an iOS device or an Android device. We have a little sort of 3-stick tripod that we give to Sofology, so they can walk around kind of holding it, and it's almost like a bit like a GoPro type
That's
concept.
what I was going to ask. They walk around the store. Yeah.
Yeah. And they can set this up, some of the good use of it is, in the bay that we have, we'll have the sofa, we might have the table. They can set the tripod up on the table, and then they can kind of like jump back into the sofa, so you can get a real good idea of how big it is, the sort of the sit, whether you sit on it or sit in it. They can use it to zoom into kind of swatches or detailing on the product, and it's just a really, really good way for customers to kind of virtually see our fantastic products.
I love it. Thank you for that example. Yeah, it sounds brilliant. I am going to go to Victoria, if I may now. Waiting patiently there. Hi, Victoria. What role does VR have in your business?
So I think what Graham's just described for Sofology is a fabulous solution, which I think some of the shared objectives to Hotter's VR are sort of quite common, in as much as VR is a technology, it's quite fancy, video chat is a technology, it's quite fancy, but ultimately what does the customer require, and how might that tech aid the solution and enhance the consumer journey? And I think many of us who are digital adopters or working in digitally led businesses really just wish to mitigate the distance that remote shopping creates. So online can feel a little unfamiliar, and particularly the pandemic encouraged and somewhat forced consumers to select online as its core channel. How do we make sure that the consumer doesn't lose that brand experience, and indeed have that value add and that wonderful tactile experience that you can get in store? So for Hotter, we actually have invested in two elements of virtual or augmented reality. So it lives within our app. So our app itself is something where we've invested a couple of £100,000, and we have two solutions. One is actual augmented reality, where you can try on virtually shoes in your own home. So to offset the fact that you can't go into store, certainly during the pandemic, or indeed to encourage channel migration, we're starting to see a solution whereby consumers can, just with their, same as Graham's example, with any of their sort of smartphones or indeed their tablet devices, look at the shoes that they're interested in and see it on their own feet. Now, it isn't quite the same as a try-on, but it certainly helps provide that consumer with the top to bottom look of the shoe, how it might work with certain outfits. And we've seen high levels of adoption of our virtual try-on solution. That's something that has ultimately created a conversion rate for those that engage with the solution that's threefold that of those that do not. And we've also seen a commensurate reduction in returns for those guys that engage with it. So a real commercial win, but for the consumer, a real positive win for them, in as much as you get that sort of value add experience. The second solution, which is something that I'm sure all apparel and footwear brands on this call can attest to, is the criticality of fit. So how might the consumer select the best fit for them if they're not able to try on, or they choose to not go into a physical environment? Little did you know, but actually 1 in 5 of us, certainly females over 50, are wearing the wrong size shoes, because something that we don't always have checked. We've invested in a technology whereby just by simply taking a 3D image of your foot, you can get the sense of not only the length and width, but also any considerations for your foot arch or any other foibles that might be going on in the anatomy of your foot. And therefore, we can make the perfect recommendation in terms of what shoes you should wear. That comes both in an in-store experience, but also, again, is hosted within our app. We chose to invest in those solutions to really befit our brand proposition, which is about precision fit. And I'm pleased to say that consumers are engaging with it in droves. We're seeing high levels of engagement and adoption, and it enables us as a brand to then leverage the digital sort of currency in terms of capturing their email address. So a whole host of benefits to the consumer and the business.
Graham, did you want to ask Victoria a question on that around returns?
Yeah, look, so I guess through this technology, I perceive one of the benefits will be reduced returns. Is that something that you've kind of seen? And I guess if so, how much?
Yeah, it is. So people that are engaging with either our virtual try-on app or the fit solutions, their returns are less than half of those that do not. So it's a marked difference. So my objective to my teams in store and in the marketing guys is to try and encourage as many consumers as possible to interact with those solutions, because the P&L benefit is absolutely significant. Yeah, it's definitely something that's aiding our profitability.
I can't believe that statistic about how many people wear the wrong size shoes. Surely they're all in pain all the time, right?
God bless them. I know we conducted a survey of over 2,000 females, and we're quite shocked, because I think people perceive, you know, your shoe size doesn't change, unlike potentially your dress size, as you age or as you eat more or eat less. But actually your foot does change, and it's something that we need to all be measuring. Get yourself into a Hotter store, and we'll make sure that you're wearing the right shoes.
Perfect segue there, lovely. All good. But yeah, great examples. Thank you, Victoria. And I'm going to go to Matthew now, if I may. We hear a lot, Matthew, about friction at the checkout. And how can retailers reduce friction at the checkout? And is it a bad thing? You know, is there a case when actually friction can be a good thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have to say, I'm still just really enjoying listening to what the guys have already said about the personalization and at the buying process online. And it made me think some of us are probably old enough to remember what boo.com tried to do back in 99, 2000. And they had the virtual, you know, the mannequin and dressing it, and you know, the internet wasn't ready, but they were 20 years ahead of their time. And hearing what Hotter and Sofology are doing feels like kind of the natural extension of that. But if you think about friction, or if I think about friction, we work with 19,000 brands worldwide, and it's something that comes up in almost every conversation with us, not least because what Locate does at the checkout, where you're letting a customer enter their address, which they need to do in you know 3 or 4 or 5 keystrokes, even in complex markets where addresses are quite complicated. That reduces friction, and in fact, address capture is one of the worst offenders at the checkout. If you present a consumer with 5, 6, 7 fields to fill in, it's one of the big reasons why folks will abandon a checkout. But if you think about friction as being just something that slows a process down, there's probably good friction and bad friction, right? So bad friction is you make someone do things in longhand, which they could do in a more streamlined way, like using Locate or providing wallet options for payments, right? So pretty much everyone's doing that now. Make the payment process as slick and as friction-free as possible. But actually, and I think we've heard some examples already, not every process needs to be lightning fast. If an example might be, if I'm using Alexa to reorder, dog biscuits, I don't need that to be a drawn out process. I just want to be able to ask to repeat order, and that should take 5 seconds. If I'm buying something of high value, we've heard the Sofology example is a great one. We were talking to the head of e-commerce at Fender Guitars recently, and he was explaining to us when all the stores were shut, you're buying a $2,000 guitar online. You don't want that process to take a minute. You want that process to take an hour. This is it's a big heart purchase. So the introduction of friction to give you the options to choose your colors and maybe buy some accessories or other things that are going to enhance your purchase. So you kind of see the emergence of good friction and bad friction, I think is the point I'm making. So we would always advise the brands that we work with to do what you can to get rid of all the bad friction, the things you have to do to complete a checkout, but actually the friction that allows you to replicate the buying experience. We've seen the virtual try-ons. We see really interesting personalization in the cosmetics world, where that is slowing the process down, but in a way that makes for a better customer experience. Once everyone's happy to go, make that checkout process as slick and as friction-free as possible, but it's probably not a one-size-fits-all. It's not stripping away all friction. It's having it in the right places and taking it away where it's going to make it harder for a consumer to check out in a way which is convenient for them.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it like that before. I hadn't thought about good and bad friction. I guess in that guitar example, you kind of want to spend some time on it, right? And you want to give it some thought and have some challenges and questions and choices along the way, so that you feel like you've spent time on your purchase, I guess.
Yeah, it's going to be device specific as well, and every brand will have their own experience of this. And what I'm doing on a mobile device, I may not be engaging in a long, drawn out shopping experience. It might be something that's more bit of research. I'll come back to it later, maybe on a tablet or a larger screen. And conversion, again, there's a lot more sort of browsing and less buying on mobile devices in some sectors. So think about the device that's being used, the type of journey that someone's going to expect in order to check out. But I think just finally on kind of our role in the world, whilst what we do is around address capture most of the time, actually there's a really kind of emotive element to this around trust and confidence. And we do a lot of research, and we published some research just before Christmas last year, looking at the peak period and asking consumers how they felt if there was a risk that this thing that they were buying to either for the holidays in the States or Christmas everywhere else, they couldn't see their relatives perhaps because of lockdowns, they were relying upon delivery. The fear they had that this thing wouldn't be delivered in time or at all really affected their levels of confidence and trust about a brand. So ensuring that your customers feel confident that the location they've just shared with you is accurate, it's been well captured, verified against a trusted source. The emotional impact on consumers is one they feel a lot more confident that what they've just done actually is going to be completed to their satisfaction, avoiding failed deliveries and improving the chances of that customer coming back and buying from you again. So yeah, good friction, bad friction is an interesting topic, I think.
It could be a whole webinar in its own, I think, actually, as well, now that you've got my head thinking about that. So Karen at the Retail Bulletin wanted to discuss for a later time. Thank you, Matthew, for that. And our audience number has actually gone up since we opened the session. So if you weren't with us right at the beginning, we'd love you to get involved. So welcome, thanks for joining us. And there's a Q&A button somewhere on your screen, depending on what device you're using. So get involved, ask a question to any of our panelists or a more general question. And my job is to make sure it gets answered for you. James, I'm going to come back to you, if I may. There was a recent report by FB that touts these big words: agile, agility, people, and utility. Wow, as the vital signals steering AR and VR. What approach should retailers be considering for in-house talent versus turnkey or outsourced models?
Yeah, absolutely. The whole AR, VR subject matter has obviously taken even more of a spotlight now due to the pandemic and the push from, I think, the industry more so to drive innovation from a consumer side and the mindset of a customer. They're probably not there yet. And some of the stats that came out of that specific Facebook report I was looking at recently pretty much said that people's interest in AR and VR, although it has doubled, if we're specifically talking about the Western world, it's still not where it is in, say, South Korea, Philippines, other parts of Asia, but it is catching on. And I think one thing that all retailers need to be honest with themselves around is my resource pool, is my talent pool, is my structure today, i.e. Assuming a sort of pre-pandemic state, is that able to cater for what is coming inbound as so far as the know-how for strategy execution on things like VR and AR. So to start out with, I think it's about striking that balance of your in-house talent pool versus what you can get through outsource, whether that's an agency model, turnkey model like you mentioned, and probably pre-pandemic, going offshore for some of these things would have made a lot of retailers and a lot of boardrooms quite nervous. But I think I was talking recently at another panel, I think we've almost been forced to seek those offshore routes to be able to get access and to the type of people and the know-how of being able to bring these into the current ecosystem, the current architecture at speed. But at the same time, help to educate internally what it means and what change that's going to bring about, as so far as the evolving KPIs, for example, right? Because you start bringing some of those technologies in, your traditional set of KPIs are going to inevitably evolve. You're going to be looking at new data streams. You're going to need to know how to interpret those data streams and actually what data is going to be valuable with those new technologies coming on board as well. So I think every retailer's probably got a different approach to consider on this. But I think first and foremost, it's about getting clear line of sight on your roadmap on what your objectives are, what you're seeking to accomplish by bringing in AR and VR. Is it because you want to get a front page of Retail Week? You know, is it because you want to, you know, please a nice journalist at the Telegraph, for example, because, you know, he loves VR and wants to be able to talk about one of his most exciting or her most exciting retailers embracing it? I think it's got to be about the customer first and foremost. You've got to make sure that you're doing this because it's going to make your customer experience 5 times, 10 times, 100 times better than what it is doing now. I also think you need to be cautious of what is happening within the competitive landscape and making sure that you can perhaps test with your customers what they see the value for them shopping with you via an AR or a VR route, for example. So hopefully that sums up a response to that question, Darren. And I think, you know, coming back to it, it's going to be different for each retailer. And I think it's about making sure you've got the customer at heart and also looking at your internal structure, your internal team, and weighing up actually to get where we need to get to in a short space of time. Can we do it with our current resource pool? Do we need to seek offshore additional support elsewhere to help us make this a reality?
Yeah, I guess it's not doing it for the sake of it, right? And it's like you said, you
absolutely,
know, it's going to actually benefit our end user, and done in a way where the customer can understand it as well. Because I think some customers fear it a little bit as well, and that's why sometimes it's not adopted. But no, great answer, thank you.
And Darren, just to say, I think, you know, coming back to my previous point as well around adoption and training, making sure, you know, your customers know what this means for them. You know, if we go back to, you know, sort of QR, you know, placing QR codes all over your shop floor and just expecting your customers to know, what do these mean? You know, how do I use it?
Yeah.
You know, how's it going to benefit me? I think we need to make sure we take lessons from those types of things, NFC and others as well, that are still evolving, and there's still room for some of them. But take all of that insight. There's a lot of insight, a lot of tests that have been out there already in other markets by existing retailers. And I think it's now about retailers, you know, sort of coming together to take those lessons and learnings to add value to the customer experience overall.
Yeah, it feels like QR codes are everywhere now. Obviously, the pandemic has definitely heightened those, you know, to order in the pub, to check into venues, there's just QR codes en masse, aren't there? So we probably never adopted them as much as we have the last 12 months. Thank you, sir. Great answer.
No worries.
Graham, this leads on from Matthew's point, really. So Matthew was giving the guitar example, but, you know, sofas are quite considered purchases as well. You know, a large amount of research and the sit test, as you called it. And then you chuck in the fact that actually a lot of people buy on finance as well. It comes back to that friction point that we were discussing with Matthew. How frictionless is your checkout process? What work have you been doing on that?
So it's one of the things that I was just going to say, actually, just before I answer that question, James, one of the things I think is also really important is what you take out as opposed to what you put in. So I think looking at your stores and looking at your experiences and stripping things out is as valuable as adding things in. But yeah, to the point about the checkout, it's one of the things that differentiates us from our competitors at Sofology is we, you know, our teams are not structured on individual kind of like commission plans or bonuses. It's all very much from a team perspective. And what that does is it allows us to drive the right behavior whereby the stores, Sofology, we talk about allowing customers to buy where they want, when they want, how they want, and through whichever channel they choose. But in order for us to do that, we need to ensure that all of our channels are kind of joined up and are seamless. So one key part to that is obviously the checkout. So you can walk into one of our stores. Let's just use Preston because it's my local store. You can walk into Preston, you can build a basket, which in effect you might have 2 or 3 products in there, and you can kind of get maybe even halfway through. So let's take that point about the finance application. Let's say you've decided you want to purchase it on finance, but actually you've forgotten your kind of last 3 or 4 addresses, or you've forgotten some identification that you need to upload as part of that kind of credit check or whatever it might be. Well, with our checkout, what you can do is you can basically just go home, log back on, pick up your process exactly where you left it. So if you left it on step 3 of the checkout, then you would rejoin at step 3. Similar from a finance application, if you were halfway through, you would come back in at the point where you exited the process. And what that does, and I guess where we're different to kind of our competitors, is it means that customers don't have to like get frustrated by the fact they've got to go back and fill in all that information again, feel like they're starting that process again. And you know, and I think to Matthew's point, where it kind of does, it's quite an emotional kind of purchase, one that you kind of, you know, it's it's probably one of the most expensive things you're going to buy apart from your house. It leaves that nice feeling that actually, do you know what? They're invested in me as a customer as much as I'm kind of trying to buy the sofa from Sofology. If you compare us to our competition, as I was saying, a lot of our competition, you would pop out and then you would have to start the whole process all over again. And a lot of that is driven by the incentives that the business put in place. So things like if you walked into your Preston store and the person who you were dealing with was individually commissioned, they would want you to go back to them. But if you called up to place your order because you didn't have time to go back in, the person on the phone wants you to do the order with them. Therefore, they want you to start that whole process all over again to kind of complete the checkout. So for us, we've been working really hard on ensuring that all of the channels that we have are all joined up and they all feed into this kind of like, I guess, omni-channel experience, as we would refer to it, but this kind of central checkout process. Again, we see the website itself plays many roles, but again, being the focal point for that kind of whole journey, whether you're in store or whether you're online, is kind of one of the things that we invest in. I think other things that we've been working on from a checkout perspective is just the way we present kind of our upsells and our attach. A lot of the things that we would upsell to a customer, things like how to dispose of your old sofa. And we work with a company called Sofa Rescue, who take old sofas and then ensure they get diverted from landfill so they don't end up in kind of big tips. One of the things that we've done with that is we've just really simplified how we present that to the customer. And obviously from an online point of view, you can't talk to the customer and explain it like you can in store. So it's just about getting across the key benefits of the service, so the ESG elements, and then just making it dead easy just to add to the order. And I think, we've seen really high, but actually our attach rate online was better than the retail attach rate last week, which was a big win from a digital point of view. So they're probably the two bits that we've been looking at over the last 12 months. Continuing our journey.
Thank you, sir. Victoria, I'm going to come on to you. Emerging tech. What are you using in the world of emerging tech to sort of enhance the customer journey, existing or prospective?
I think it depends on the definition of emerging. I think the technology space is so exciting in as much as there's always something new. That said, for me, emerging and innovation are often where you take a tried and tested formula that another brand has done or something that you've tried before, and you just iterate and move it forward. So we're continuously trying to leverage any emerging tech, but I think you've got to make sure your core backbone is right. So that ongoing review of the checkout and how frictionless or the right balance of friction, the ongoing approach to conversion rate optimization, and all of your commensurate sort of usability and multivariate testing. From an emerging tech perspective, and Matthew from Locate, I'm thankful to be a customer of Locate. Everything from consumer personalization to geographical local targeting, the technology nowadays is so powerful, and it's about ensuring that you don't necessarily overcomplicate. So for me, it's about less is more, but doing it well. And that's where the augmented reality and what we call footprint, which is the foot measuring, they're two of the sort of key technologies that we're leveraging and using quite efficiently. Many of the technology solutions that we've previously onboarded at Hotter have in turn been releasing new functionality on an ongoing basis. And one of the areas that we're really enjoying success is in our global activity, where we can truly localize, whether that's currency, language, delivery proposition, and make sure that the customer experience is something that is truly one-to-one rather than sort of one-to-many or worst or broadcast. I think the way by which technologies are continuing to develop, which really pleases me and motivates me, is much more omni-focused. So perhaps in the last sort of 3 years or so, it's very much been what technology stack is your digital ecosystem built upon. And I like that now questions and strategies and indeed investment decisions are made much more omni. So how do we engage the retail stores and or the contact center in a way that technology is absolutely at the heart of everything we're doing? And whether it's voice commerce or it's WhatsApp ordering, they're the things to watch for. Certainly in our brand proposition, we're not necessarily a leader, our consumer isn't craving the absolute latest. So I've got the good fortune to look at some of the great stuff some of the more innovative brands are doing, and see how that might work for ourselves. But yeah, loads of innovation coming up. But for me, absolutely, it's all about the app and making sure that we harness the power of that relationship and that part of the consumer journey.
That's really interesting to hear, and I know lots of people still feel they have lots of work to do on their apps, and so I'm sure that insight will be very useful for them. Matthew, surge of to online over the last 16 months. It was growing already, and then it just had this tidal wave of activity on the back of the pandemic. Has that affected consumers' expectations of the online experience as well?
Yeah, well, there's a webinar in its own right, isn't it? I mean, what a massive question.
We're coming up with all these new subjects for whole webinars, yeah.
I know, it's going to be great. Well, I think we've got a great team here. We should come back and do this again a few more times. And I should say, by the way, firstly, thank you for the shout out, Victoria. We're very proud to have you as a customer. Thank you for working with us. And innovation is iteration. I think I 100% agree with. It's not invention. It is those small steps that ultimately innovate and create new opportunities and experiences. So we're not a brand. So I'm going to reflect, what we learned from the 19,000 odd brands that we work with and what they tell us about what's changed. I'll pick a few examples if that's going to be helpful. I think firstly, there was that surge of new shoppers that had no other choice, right? So their stores were shut and they had to shop online if that was an open opportunity for them. So maybe we had, and some of the guys may have experienced this, you had shoppers that were coming online for the first time, and therefore they were finding their way through slick, uncluttered, well-designed user experiences. We're going to do better in that situation because less sophisticated online shoppers would find their way through and be able to convert more easily. As those shoppers became more sophisticated over time, because it was an extended period of store closures, then you had an opportunity to keep those shoppers online by creating those well thought out, uncluttered user experiences. So I think there's been a sophistication that's happened very quickly of new shoppers online, and we see a lot of evidence of that in different segments. But I think also it's not necessarily created, but it's put fuel into some emerging new sectors. So think about rapid grocery delivery, and you've got these new brands, whether it's Zap or Jiffy or Get Here or Whoosh in conjunction with Tesco, that are now offering grocery deliveries within 10 minutes, 15 minutes in large cities. And from our perspective, the success of those, firstly, I think it's referred to as the democratization of laziness. So we were just at home for months and months and months, and we just pressed buttons and things happened. And that's really, I think, sort of incentivized these rapid delivery organizations. I read yesterday, Screwfix are now offering 30-minute delivery of things you might have just forgotten to buy for a home project or a building site. The key feature of all of that is accurate location. So any brands that haven't got the ability to make sure they capture accurate location data, whether it's somebody who's literally on the move or they're at not their home address, they're somewhere else, they don't even know the whole address, they just want to press a button and say, I'm here. They want to use a what 3-word address, not their physical address. It's important that brands just be able to say, that's fine. You just you press a button, or you just tell us what you want, and we're going to get things to you. And I think that, in my opinion, is that enforced stay at home and do everything online has changed consumers' expectations and also what they're now prepared to interact with. And I think rapid grocery is probably a good example of that. I think the second point I'd make is I'll give the example of Michael's stores. So I think they're the largest sort of hobbycraft chain in the US, huge corporation. And all of their stores used to have kind of a craft room, and they'd get people in and they'd run little sessions, and 20, 30 people at a time would come in to learn how to do something. When the stores closed, they started running those sessions online, and they get 1,000 people show up or 2,000 people. So they've got absolutely no intention of rerunning these small 20-person events because they do it online and they get 2,000. So the way in which we see consumers being willing to interact with brands at scale, and then providing they've got a nicely aligned in-store and online experience, if indeed you are multi-channel, I think consumers' expectations have developed really quickly, particularly those that weren't interacting online at the beginning of the pandemic. So as I said, there's a billion things you could say, and the brands are going to have a much sort of closer to home experience. But I think that's where we've seen some of these changes that probably aren't going to go back as a result of the last 16 months.
That's a great examples as well. Yeah, and I think that the event example for Hobbycraft is a great one. The amount of the power you can of the audience you can draw in compared to physical is massive online now as well. So a really good example. My panelists have been very busy. So we had an anonymous attendee actually ask, thank you Anonymous, ask a question directly to Graham and Victoria. So your question has been answered by the panel. Your question was around what are the biggest challenges you're facing in optimizing your checkouts at the moment. And Victoria and Graham have both put very full answers into the text for you. Hopefully you can see that. Do let us know whether that helps or not. We are whizzing through this webinar. So we are 45 minutes in. So I'm probably going to do another round of questions for our panel. And before we know it, we'll be out of time. So James, the killer closing question for your time on the panel today. Who will win the one-click checkout race? What is the one-click checkout race actually?
Okay, so I think it's been talked about in, well, certainly by Victoria and Matthew as well. I think the one-click checkout race. So there are a couple of interesting companies aggressively acquiring and onboarding retailers across the globe just now. Two that spring to mind would be probably Bolt and Fast, are two that are making rapid headway. And what this is all about is it's really building on what, you know, Dablin's Apple and Amazon and Facebook and the guys have sort of put into customers' mindsets over the last few years. So this is about exactly what Matthew was talking about. You know, I just want to be able to go onto your store. I want to be able to make my purchase. I don't want to have to fill out 10 fields of information for every retailer that I want to shop with. I also have maybe 2 debit cards and a couple of credit cards. I don't know which one these last 3 digits refers to. Just take the headache away from me so that I can make my experience with you slicker, and keep at pace, and it's going to be a reason for me to keep coming back to you. And I think there are, in addition to that, are also some really interesting moves with people like Klarna, offering, you know, easy payment solutions, and a lot of retailers have embraced this because Klarna have made it so easy for retailers to embrace this as well. So in terms of who's going to win the race, I mean, you know, from a retailer's perspective, I'll probably hold judgment right now for this session because there's a lot going on and it would be unfair. However, I think in terms of the companies that I've mentioned just there, I think what we're going to see is probably a consolidation of that market in the next 4 to 5 years, maybe even a shorter time frame, as customers get more used to, you know, feeling comfortable signing up once with a retailer and then having recognition as they move through to other retailers or, you know, purchase, you know, in other retailers in the online space. And I also think that in the physical space as well, it's going to become even more prevalent so that you have just got that ability to effectively shop once with a retailer. And that means each time you then go online, it's taken care of, because the drop-off rate on poor checkouts, Matthew referred to it earlier on. Yeah, there are some great learnings you can get when things go wrong and you can make things better. That's the only way you're going to make things better is through knowing what isn't working. But I think drop-off rates as much as 80% in checkout. And that's a real pain point and a real frustration for retailers and e-commerce businesses. So I think it's only a good thing if we can very quickly get customers used to and confident in signing up once and therefore being able to check out with both competitors and other like-minded retailers alike.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for the insight you brought to the panel today as well. You've been superb. Thanks for your time.
No, thanks, Darren.
I'm going to come on to you, sir, if I may. Graham, if you wouldn't mind, would you share your answer with the wider audience around the challenges you've been facing on optimizing your checkout?
Yeah, sure. So I guess one of the things that Sofology has always been known for is obviously selling sofas and upholstery. But more recently with, I guess, home furnishing companies going down the route of shop the room, shop the look, which you see kind of all over the place these days. We're broadening our range out into things like, you know, rugs, tables, lamps, or we call them occasional. Now that poses a couple of challenges to us. Number one, they're often on different lead times to the main products that you're buying, so the sofas. So we've got a big challenge at the minute about how do we, and especially as we grow our range, including stocked items, how do we present to the customer the options that they've got from a delivery and a fulfillment perspective, and do that in a simple way. So that's the first challenge that we're working on, because some people want it all at the same time, which has implications downstream for us. Some people want it just as it can kind of come and go from there. The second challenge that we're facing at the minute is similar to, I think, Victoria's answer as well, she may touch on in a minute, is around payment methods. So as we broaden into kind of these smaller price point categories, not all products are, average product value is smaller, but the majority of cushions are less than a sofa. The ability to check out fast and with things like Apple Pay and Google Pay and different options is something that's incredibly relevant. And you don't tend to buy a sofa using Apple Pay. So we don't currently kind of have those payment methods embedded within our checkout. So that's definitely something that we're kind of on with, and we need to kind of try and find ways to move away from your traditional enter your credit card or do a finance application type approach. So that's good. I think one good example of a retailer that's doing sort of subscription well, Pets at Home. So I have a dog, she's not with me at the minute, but the Pets at Home subscribes kind of like food service and that sort of, talk about removing friction from a checkout. It's like, I don't even remember when the food's going to be gone. So just turns up on my doorstep, makes it dead easy.
I should be a shareholder in that business, the amount of money I spend in Pets at Home, but there you go. Great example. Graham, always a pleasure to have you on the panel. Good to work with you again, sir. Thanks for your input today as well.
Likewise.
Victoria, your session is coming to a wrap as well. Technology, we spoke a lot about some of the innovations and emerging technology and so on. How are you using tech to really kind of marry up the channels, if you like? I don't really like the word omni-channel, but you know what I'm saying. Make it the seamless experience across channels. How about that?
That sounds, I prefer your descriptor. So I think, I've spoken about some of the technologies and innovations that Hotter has introduced. One of the key elements is ensuring that we can recognise the consumer, and we can also identify the stock location. So fundamentally, whether it's through click and collect or delivery from store to home, it's about ensuring that the consumer experience is as optimised as possible. I think that with regards to innovation, this sort of past 18 months has been the most innovative perhaps of many of our careers, and the digital transformation that we've all undertaken is something that I think sets us up for real success. I think the consumer behaviour shift is something that we'll continue to have to stick close to, making sure that as he or she craves or demands something different from us as brands and retailers, we have to respond to their needs. But with regards to the technology, the choices are endless, and it's about making sure that we try and focus on which will make the biggest benefit to the consumer journey. And for us, we're delighted with the roadmap that's ahead of us, and we'll continue to watch and see what some of the tech providers bring out. So staying close to the market and close to the technological solutions is something that will make sure that we develop the right solutions.
Well, thank you. A great answer, and thank you for your time again on the panel today, and good luck to you and the team at Hotter as we come out the other side, hopefully, as well. Matthew, I'm going to come to you, please, to wrap up the whole session as our headline sponsor as well. So much been discussed today, and this kind of friction thing is going to be a massive subject, and I hadn't even considered the fact there was good friction as well. What would be a closing thought for you for our audience today? What would you like to leave our audience with?
Good grief. That's I'd probably rather hear what Graham and Victoria had to say on that. But so our role in the world, right? So we've got these 20,000 customers that we're working with. We learn from them. I think where we've seen the deployment of technology to meet customer expectations and customer needs, that's where we've seen rapid growth. And the example I'll pick, and I could pick hundreds, is Gymshark. And we've worked with Gymshark since Ben was selling stuff out of his back bedroom. And the ease in which they grew the business, and particularly went cross-border. So using technology like Locates and Stripe just to enable customers from anywhere in the world to buy from them was just a great example of deploying this sort of democratization of technology. So even small businesses can get really powerful kind of enterprise grade technology to grow their businesses from the ground up and to scale up to really large businesses like Gymshark. So I think we'd encourage brands from the smallest to the largest just to look at those technologies which solve sometimes small but really irksome customer problems. Failed deliveries is still one of the things that will likely encourage or discourage someone from shopping with you again. So just fix that. And you can do that with Locate. You can fix your payments issues with wallets and Stripe and other people's. So I think the digital transformation has got so many angles to it. Make choices that are just going to create experiences for customers, which encourage them to come back, alleviate some of those really just niggly pain points, which you can do something about and build trust and build confidence. Do that, and I think you've got a winning formula.
Great example. I just think, the whole Gymshark story is just astonishing, so yeah, that's a really good example to close with. Matthew, thank you, sir, and thank you again to Locate for their support of the event today as well. That's a wrap, people. That's the way to pass an hour on a grey Wednesday morning. Thank you to an astonishing panel, to Matthew, to James, to Graham and Victoria. You make my life easy because you guys produce all the great content, and the audience stayed with us as well. So it seems to me that you kept their interest. So thank you so much. We're taking a little bit of a break now at the Retail Bulletin. We're back at 1 o'clock on how to wow at first glance online. How's that for a subject? We'll be unpacking that with a great panel as well. But for now, you have an hour off from the events today, and enjoy that time. Thank you again to all of the panelists and to Locate, and enjoy the rest of your day. See you at 1 o'clock. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.